Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today, we would be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 15 December 2017. Now let us begin. Now we would begin by first analyzing the news about the special quotes from page 1. Now it is necessary to understand this news with the corresponding news on page 10. Now we have taken this article from page 1 and the second article from page 10. Now the question is, what is important about this news? Now the Supreme Court has given its assent to the central government's scheme to set up 12 special courts. Now the question is, what are these special courts? Now these special courts are fast-track courts which has been formed to prosecute and dispose criminal cases against MPs and MLAs. Now these special courts are fast-track courts because they've been asked to dispose of these cases in 1 year. Now these fast-track courts would be set up at the High Court level, and the states would coordinate with the High Court to ensure that the fast-track courts start functioning from 1st March 2018. Now up till here, we have covered as to why these special fast-track courts are in the news. What are these special fast-track courts? What is the purpose of these fast-track courts? Where they would be established? And you also know as to when these fast-track courts would start. Now this article is important from your mains examination point of view because it deals with the topic of decriminalization of politics. And you can refer to these special courts whenever a question on decriminalization of politics is asked in your essay or in your mains examination. Now we move on to our next article. Now we have taken this news from page 8. Now this editorial gives a comparative example of two global aspects which are being balanced by India. Is that India is a part of the RIC or the Russia-India-China trilateral. Now this trilateral was formed in 2002 to balance US-led domination in international bodies and on international issues. So now through this trilateral, India and China, and to a lesser extent Russia, cooperated on the reform of international bodies such as of IMF or in negotiations in the WTO and on international issues such as climate change talks. And apart from this, they cooperated on various several issues. While the second aspect which the editorial talks about, that India is a part of the informal quadrilateral group, which recently had an informal meet in 2017 and intends to balance China in the Asia-Pacific region. Now India, with the other members of the Quad, which are US, Japan and Australia, seek to balance China in the Asia-Pacific region in China's One Belt, One Road program or its growing unilateralism in the South China Sea and in various other fields. Now the crux of the editorial is that India is trying to balance the United States and the Western countries with its engagement with Russia and China, while on the other hand, it is trying to balance China with its engagement with the United States, Japan as part of the quadrilateral group. Now up till here, we have understood the two aspects of this editorial, what India is trying to achieve through its strict trilateral and also what India is trying to achieve through the quadrilateral group. Now this policy of balance of power being pursued by India is based on two principles. The first principle is strategic autonomy, which means that India will not be influenced by the US or China or any other country in making decisions on international issues. While the second principle which emerges is that India will pursue a policy of multilateralism, which means that India would engage with every country based on its national interest. Now hopefully up till here you have understood how India is trying to balance its global relations and on which principles this balance of power is based upon. Now a question can be asked in your mains examination in the international relations section, such as the global power shift in Asia Pacific region has imposed a complex diplomatic path for India. Comment. While the term global power shift refers to the rise of China and the withdrawal of the United States in the Asia Pacific region, while the term complex diplomatic path refers to India's policy of balance of power in the Asia Pacific region. Now, with the above explanation of this editorial, you can answer this question. Now we move on to our next article. Now we have taken this article from page 8. Now this article talks about the weak disaster management response that had occurred after the cyclone Oki. Now the first question that is raised is what went wrong in the disaster management after cyclone Oki. To understand this, let us look at two different images of tropical cyclones in India. Now in the first image, you see a cyclone that has been formed in the Bay of Bengal. Now it would take 4 to 5 days for this cyclone to hit the coast of India. While in the second image of cyclone Oki, it formed into a cyclone at the southwest coast of Sri Lanka, and therefore India and the government of Tamil Nadu and of other states did not have time to prepare for this disaster. So this is one of the main reasons as to why India didn't have time to prepare for cyclone Oki. Now moving back to the main article. Now let us understand as to what is the response of India and of the National Disaster Management Authority with regard to the disaster management of cyclones. Now the National Disaster Management Authority has given guidelines for management of cyclones in 2009. Now let us understand as to what are the specific guidelines that have been given. The first guideline is of warning. Now the Indian Meteorological Department or IMD warns the Indian government and the National Disaster Management Authority and the relevant state disaster management authority and the district disaster management authority. Now after this, the second point is warning communication, which is given by the various disaster management authorities to the general public. The third point is structural mitigation measures. Now it means that there should be preparations in form of cyclone shelters, proper buildings, roads, etc., which should be built to survive a disaster. The fourth point is management of coastal zones. Now it means that there should be provisions to prevent coastal erosions, such as through the use of mangroves and through other factors. Now the fifth point is response. Now this refers to the evacuation of the affected population. For this, the National Disaster Management Authority has specialized personnel called the National Disaster Response Force. And similarly, the State Disaster Management Authority has a State Disaster Response Force for quick response to a disaster. And the sixth and the last point is, and the sixth point, which is also the last point, is rehabilitation, which is a post-disaster response and includes settling those people which have been affected by a cyclonic disaster. Now up till here, you understand the guidelines which are to be followed during a cyclone disaster. What are the 6 measures that have been given under these guidelines? So if a question is asked in your mains examination in the environment section on disaster management with regard to cyclones, you will be able to answer based on this explanation. Moreover, if you want to further understand this topic and about Cyclone Oki, you could refer to the upcoming January edition of the Focus magazine. Now we move on to our next article. Now we have taken this news from page 9. Now the first thing you need to know is the contextual background of this news. Now the Supreme Court had observed in the Pravasi Bhalai Sangathan versus Union of India case that hate speech requires an analysis by the Law Commission of India. Now the Law Commission has submitted its report, based upon which we move to our second point. Now the Law Commission of India, through its 267th report, has recommended for the formation of the Criminal Law Amendment Bill 2017. Now the question is, what is the purpose of this bill? Now this bill intends to add two sections to the IPC or the Indian Penal Code. Now the first section that the Commission has recommended is Section 153C, which intends to prohibit incitement to hatred, while the second section that has been recommended is Section 505A, which highlights causing fear, alarm, or provocation of violence in certain cases. Now, up till here, we know which report of the Law Commission deals with hate speech. We also understand which provision the Law Commission has recommended to deal with hate speech, what sections should be added in the Indian Penal Code to deal with this problem, and we also know what each penal code focuses on. Now we move on to our next article. Now we have taken this news from page 13. Now this article talks about the word Inequality Report, and I will try to explain it to you, the brief highlights of this report. Now the word Inequality Report. Now the report has given certain statistics on the income share of the top 1% income earners in India. Now it says that in 1983, the share of the top 1% was around 6%, while this income share in the year 2014 rose to 23%. Now this means that in the year 2014, the top 1%, which is about 7.8 million people in India, had about 23% of India's income share. Now in comparison, the bottom 50% income earners in India, which is about 390 million people, had only about 2/3 of the income of the top 1%. Which means that if the top 1% earns rupees 100, the bottom 50% only earns about roughly 67 rupees. You also have to understand that this rupees 100 is being shared by just 7.8 million people, while this rupees 67 would be shared by 390 million people. Now this article is important for your mains examination in the economics section, wherein you can use this report and these statistics in a question on income inequality in India. Now with this, we come to an end in the analysis of today's paper. Now let's move on to the question for today.